Okay, so the outline of what we're going to work on when we make a form. First, of course, you should think about a form as being a survey that collects information from people via the internet, and the kinds of questions that you're going to ask, the kinds of answers that you expect people to give to your questions will determine the kinds of question types that you pick when you're laying out a form. So let me just bring up a couple of form examples. So here's a simple, obvious one, is my picking a computer class form, which many of you have probably already seen before. But here's an example of a drop-down list, a regular text answer or short answer. And one of the powerful things about Google Forms is that every form that you create collects its answers in a spreadsheet. Okay, so let's go ahead and get to the actual use of Google Forms. I don't know if you guys, since you're not in the room with me, I'm just going to carry on. I'll keep the Blue Jeans meeting up on my left screen here so I can see if anybody has a chat question. Okay, so my example that I want to use today is a transportation survey. And I'm going to take the list of people who are in the Blue Jeans meeting and I'm going to share some files with you guys so you can work with me here. Okay, so once you get that link in your email, you should see this is the handout. And this spreadsheet has some of the sample questions that we're going to use. Okay, and then also one of the possible forms included a question about buildings. So I went ahead and downloaded a list of all the campus buildings. The list is not small, so it may be that we don't need to actually paste 192 different options in our drop-down list, but we could. Okay, so to get our form started, I'm going to start with my transportation survey. In Drive, the safe thing to do is to start by clicking New, then More, and then Google Forms. In my case, I'm going to create it in the shared folder so you guys can see the one that I'm making. My untitled form will show up. If I click on the title here, I can give it a name, and I'll put my name in there so there's no confusion about which one we're looking at. Now, as you'll see from the handout, and you can also see from looking at the form itself, there are these different question types, and depending on the kind of answer that you're trying to get, that'll really determine which type you're going to pick for each question. So multiple choice is actually the only one that's a little bit confusing because you don't get to pick multiple things. It's multiple alternatives. So use a multiple choice for a pick one of many. But checkboxes are good for a pick one or many. So you don't have to choose just one, but you could. Then a drop-down is good if you're going to pick one from a really long list and you don't want to take up a huge amount of room on your form. Like our building form would be a good choice for a drop-down, our building list. Short answer and paragraph are just varying lengths. Usually most items can take a short answer. It's not that short. But if you're going to write an essay or something, put a paragraph in there if it can be of any length. Then we've got a linear scale, which is the classic, on a scale of 1 to 10 or whichever scale you choose. There's a multiple choice grid, which might be useful if you have something like, say what your top 3 items are. Maybe you could have a list down one axis on the left side in a column of different items, and then going across you might have numbers like 1 through 5. So you could then easily take the items on the list on the left side and rank them So that might be a good choice for something like a multiple choice grid, where you've got not just one linear axis that you're scaling against, but two axes. Date and time. I say that they're often more trouble than they're worth to pick as a question type. The reason is that the formatting requirements for date and time are very precise. So it may make more sense in most cases, like if you're offering class times or you're offering commute times or work hours or something like that, to just pick start and end times that they can choose from a list instead of making them key them in. If they key in a time, it's going to ask for hours, minutes, and seconds, and then you have the whole 12 or 24-hour time option. So those things are available as choices, but I find that almost always I give them a choice or a drop-down instead of asking them to key something in. Okay. In a form, one of the things that you can do is to have branching of forms, which means when you get to a decision point, you have sort of an either this or that option. Depending on which one they choose, it can skip them ahead to either one page of your form or another page. So if you want to add a section, that's this little floating diagram over here on the right. Section has items that you can insert. So that's new question, title and description, image, video, and this last little thing here is a new section. And I've got a little numbered list in here about branching and logic. So, okay, to get back to actually using our form choices, if you've got questions that you want to work with, you might say to yourself, okay, well, which kind of question am I likely to want to use for this? Which type? So if you want them to enter their name, of course, that's just going to be your standard short answer for that. Primary work location. That's interesting. It probably would make, it depends. If it's for the whole campus, maybe you'd use a drop-down list. If it were within the Division of Student Affairs, there are only a certain number of buildings you might choose from. Like if you could say, I'm going to make a new spreadsheet tab down here at the bottom. So if they were like SA buildings, then you might only have a few. So let me bump up the text here. But something like, if you have a fairly limited number like that, maybe you would use multiple choice for it, depending on what the scope is, or drop down. So you might say multiple choice. Do you work or attend meetings in more than one building? Well, that's going to be a simple yes or no. And this would be a good choice for either a checkbox or a multiple choice. And this would be a great one for branching, because you may ask different questions depending on the answer to that question. So if they say yes to that, then you might go ahead to which buildings do you need to visit, and again, that could be that'll probably be checkboxes because they may have to visit more than one. Affiliation, that's going to be simple, so it could be drop down, it could be multiple choice, or I guess it could be checkboxes. I mean, if affiliations could include any of these guys, I guess you pretty much have to be only one of them. Just a regular student or a student employee, kind of one or the other, or faculty or staff. In that case, it might be something as simple as multiple choice. Department do you work in? Again, depends on the scope. Could be a drop-down list, could be multiple choice, could be checkboxes. Well, no, probably not checkboxes, but let's say that might be a drop-down. How long is your commute? For that, you'll probably want to have it be scale, like, less than 3 miles, 3 to 5 miles, 5 to 10 miles, or, 10 or more, and keep jumping up in increments. So maybe that would be a drop-down or a multiple choice. And this would be a scale of 1 to 10 or 1 to 100 or whatever you'd want to use for that. And then modes of transportation, since it's plural, modes, you'd probably want to use something like checkboxes for that. So let's say that this is going to be kind of our template for how we want to proceed. I'm going to drag this over to my other monitor so I can look at the form and work on it at the same time. Okay, so start with, you've just created a new blank form. I should mention parenthetically that Google, being a web-based service, unlike an installed app, the actual way the thing looks and behaves changes over time. Nowadays, when you look for documentation about Google Drive, you'll often see people have to split their answer up into two different parts, one of them for quote-unquote old Google Drive and one of them for new Google Drive. The new Google Drive is the one I've got, which doesn't have a menu bar along the top, doesn't have, and so some of the layout is different depending on whether you're using new or old Drive, but the functionality is largely the same. Let me infer that what they're really going for here is fewer words for the controls and more pictures. I'm guessing that if you're Google, you've got people in every language all over the world, and the fewer different word-based menu items you have to modify and localize for different places around the world, the easier your job is. So if people can understand that this is going to be your preview, your little eyeball here, this is going to be your color palette and themes, and the little gear means settings, that gives them less work, I guess, to do. That certainly seems to be the way they're going, is to go with more pictograms. Okay, so to start with, if we want to ask the person's name, you've got a choice here of question type. This will just be a short answer. There's a little switch down at the bottom of every question that lets you turn on required or not required. If you turn it on, it'll show up in the preview as having this little red asterisk next to it. That'll indicate required, as you can see right there. If I turn it off, I like to say right in the name of the field, optional, so they don't, just so it's really clear right up front whether they need to answer it or not. Okay, once you've finished this is just a simple question with a short answer. You can go ahead and say add another question. So then we'll get to which is your primary work location, and I may as well copy and paste. Now for the primary work location, multiple choice is a good example. Let's say that I'm using my student affairs buildings list. Something kind of clever that you can do here is if you have a list that you've made or a list that exists somewhere else and you highlight these cells and copy them, when you go back to your form and you go to set up your multiple choice, if I paste here, Control V, it'll go ahead and drop my options for my spreadsheet right in here so I don't have to enter them again. Here's the choice here where you can say, what if I've forgotten a location? Make sure to include this, add other, which lets them fill in the location that they might work out of. Okay, so now I've got multiple choice. Since I'm saying primary work location, that's a singular one choice, this multiple choice option is a good one. So I'll go ahead and stick with that. Okay, next, I'm going to go back to do you work or attend meetings in more than one building. So I'll highlight and copy that. I'm going to go ahead and add another question. And paste that in. Okay, so in this case, it's just yes or no. I guess in general, it may be good. Oh yeah, maybe I should even add something like work from home as a primary work location, but for the sake of this exercise, I don't have to make it 100%. So in this case, I'll go ahead and leave it as multiple choice. I'll make the first option be yes. I'll make the next option be no. I won't add another in this case. Now, I'm going to, when I click on yes or no, there's this little 3 dots button in the lower right that gives me this option called Go to Section Based on Answer. Now, I haven't defined any sections yet, but I'll do that next, and then I'll come back to this yes or no and choose this Go to Section Based on Answer. So for right now, I'll just leave this here. Now I'm going to go ahead and add a section. Okay, so after section 1, continue to the next section is my choice right now. But it also has thrown in this new section down here. So I'm going to say one or single building. And then I'll make a separate section. So now that I've got these different sections, if I go to, let's say that I want my single building survey continuation to come next, I'll look back at my question list and see which ones apply. Which buildings do you need to visit during a typical work week? Might be the only thing that I need to do if they say yes, that I don't need to do if they say no. So I'm going to put the plural answer section to be the first one. All right, we'll leave this here for a moment. It's not as easy as moving a question around. If you want to move a question around, you can just drag the question by clicking on it here and moving it up or down. But for sections, it looks as if it's going to take something different. So I'm going to leave them alone for a moment. So let's say, do you work or attend meetings in more than one building? Back to that for a second. I'm going to click on that question and then hit the little 3 dots button down here and say go to section based on answer. Now, next to yes, I've got a drop down that says continue to next section. If they work in more than one building, then I'm going to go to plural building survey. If they don't work or attend meetings in more than one building, I'll go ahead and continue to single building survey. All right, once I've gotten that set up, maybe that's a required question because without it, I won't know what to do next. So we'll go ahead and make that one required. Okay, now I'm going to skip over and jump down to the plural building survey continuation and add a question. So the first one that I want, the only one that I need for that is this one called which buildings do you need to visit during a typical work week? So I'll put that question in. And in this case, maybe I'm gonna pretend that this is a checkboxes situation because there might be a lot of different answers to that. And this could be the case where I want to actually, no, I don't want to do checkboxes for a great huge list. Instead, I'm going to take my small set of buildings here and use these as the example. So I'm going to copy that set from my spreadsheet and paste. All right. And it might have worked even in the first one. So I don't need that option 1 floating up there. I'm going to go ahead and hit X. So now I've got these as a list. I'd better go ahead and choose add other in case there is a place that they don't, that I haven't thought of. And now that's all I need in my plural building survey continuation. Now from that, I'm going to go ahead and continue from there. So I'll hit the plural, throw my new section in at the end instead of in the middle. There it is. Okay. Well, I clicked at the bottom of everything and hit add section. Now I'm going to copy and paste in my single building survey continuation or survey continuation for everyone. It's a little clearer. All right, so then that means I've got to come up here and add, if they work in more than one building, go to plural, and if they don't, go ahead and skip to survey continuation for everyone. All right, so now I'll pop down here to the survey continuation for everyone and add my next question. All right, my questions list. Now we've got things like, what's your affiliation with the university, which department? So let's go ahead and get those in place. Affiliation with the university. That's going to probably stay multiple choice. Since I've got a list of affiliations that I can copy, I'll come over here and highlight this and paste them. And just in case, I'll add other in case there's something I haven't thought of. I'm sure they could be right. They could be alumni. There are different choices. So okay, there's affiliation. Which department do you work in? So new question. If that's going to be a drop-down list, then I'm going to change this one to drop-down. And then let's say that we want, so let's say that I've got this list of things that I can copy and move over. Okay, so a question like, how long is your commute one way if driving? Probably that would make sense to do something like drop down or multiple choice. I'm going to duplicate this sheet, call it commutes, and I just wanted to have that formatting for the font, and we'll just leave it at that. Okay, so we've got all these choices that they can use. And I guess we'll choose a drop down for that again. So I'll go ahead and take those, make a new question. Make that a drop down. And then this one, the how much do you worry or stress about parking at or transportation, that's going to be a scale question. So we'll go ahead and add that in and choose linear scale. Now, linear scale is kind of fun because it gives you a choice of 1 to any number. So 5 gives you a middle ground, a sort of neutral, being an odd number. Any of the odd numbers you choose will give you that balance point in the middle. An even number like scale of 1 to 10, you're going to land either on the left side or the right side. So, for the scale of 1 is usually the least. So, and then, so you can put the scale in there, and you'll see a little preview here of what that would look like. And I'll go ahead and put in my last question, which is going to be the modes of transportation. So for this, since it's modes plural, come to think of it, I could use my multiple choice grid. So we have different rows. So the row 1 might be car, row 2 Bart, bus. I better be more specific. Drive alone, Bart, bus, carpool, I don't know, something like that. And then going across the top here would be columns, like, so this grid will let people pick that. This gives you the choice of requiring a response per row. That wouldn't be appropriate in this case. You can't necessarily have more than one response per row because you can't drive alone both 5 days and 3 days per week. But the real question here is whether you want to require it or not. Since I can't require that everybody pick from every row, I won't include that. But there might be situations where you would need somebody to pick. Like if you were ranking things, like going down a list of priorities in a community meeting or something, and having people pick their top 5, and there are only 5 of them, then you could say, well, you've got to give every one of them a number, whatever that number is. That might be a good example. Okay, so now I've got that is pretty much set up, I think. So I'm going to go up here and hit my preview button and see what it looks like. Okay, so I've got my name, primary work location. Now this will be multiple choice, which means I can't pick more than one of them. If I attend meetings in more than one building, and I say yes, and I hit next, it'll take me to this. So I could say, well, you know, I often go here, and here, and here, and sometimes here. But during a typical work week, it would be those, and if I say next, then it'll take me on to these other points. So I'm a staff guy, I work in SAIT, my commute is 10 to 15 miles. I've got, you know, moderate, but not too bad. And then here's my my modes of transportation. So I probably drive alone 2 days a week. I bike 2 or 3 days a week. And maybe I take BART 1 day a week. Something like that. And then if I submit, so this gives me a sense of what that, what the preview for that form will look like. So, questions, the form questions. Oh, something that I didn't mention. If you're using dates, make the dates, do yourself a favor and make the dates sortable. I wanted it to be something that people could look at and then see in their list and make it really easy for them. But the way I formatted my dates in the drop-down list didn't make it sortable. Then when I actually went to sort my responses, it sorted in a meaningful way. But I had a brain lapse this time around and used the word July instead of a 2-digit number or something, and that was not very helpful. Duplicating an item. Let me just pop back over here to show something. So if you've already set up something and you've done the work, like you've just set up this grid and then you want to do another grid, you may find that it would be easier to hit duplicate. As soon as you hit duplicate, it'll just throw another example of that in, and then you can edit it rather than reinventing the wheel from scratch. As I said earlier, unlike with sections, it's easy to move questions around. So if I say to myself, maybe I want my how much do you worry stress to be the last question that they answer, there's this little 6-dot button here that will let me grab it and move it. So now my worry stress thing is at the bottom. So yeah, the way to move stuff is with this little window shade button right here. We talked about branching. When you give a section a name, I should go ahead and call this section. When you give the section a name, you'll notice that the if-then logic helpfully gives the name here as a choice instead of just the number. So that's a useful thing. Okay, style, adding colors or themes. Separator lines used to be more important in the old version of forms. You used to see these sections not divided up like this with these clear boundary lines. I don't think that the dividing lines are really important anymore. So I will probably just not include that. Colors or themes. They've simplified that, and that's good and bad. But if you go up to the color palette, they give you choices of colors. So I could change it to a green theme or whatever I wanted to do there. There's also this option of uploading a picture, but the picture has to be, I guess it can be a photo. I don't know if I've got a good example. That's what that little preview was trying to tell me. Okay, so let me drag this bigger if I can. Oh, it's telling me that it can only do one part of it. So if I wanted it to be that part, and I say select, then it'll think about it for a while and finally, I don't know. So you can do a certain amount of customization by making your own image and putting it behind the scenes there. But as you can see, it looks like it's only putting it in as kind of a header at the top of that. So that's a little bit about the themes. Probably in most cases you'll just stick to colors or something like that. You could put like the Berkeley gold color in there or something. Okay, sending the form to its intended audience. When it comes to sharing the form as a live form, you hit the send button, and then I could choose to send this to people. So if I choose individual people, there's a choice here that says include form in email. I don't like to do that because I don't want them to actually see the form spread out in the body of an email message. I want them to click on it and go to see the real thing. But there is at least that option. Here's this thing that says automatically connect their UC Berkeley username. That really depends on your audience. If it's going to everybody within student affairs or something, then maybe that makes sense. If it's going to anybody outside the organization, then of course you're not going to choose that. So if I go ahead and choose send, now you guys have actually gotten something in your inbox that says, Nathan, has just shared this form with you. That means I should probably share it with myself and just show what that looks like. Transportation form. I've invited you to fill out a form. So this is what people can get if they're just going to respond. This will take them straight into the live form view. And they can go ahead and get on with it and fill out the form. So if somebody does get the form, let me go ahead and, okay, then I submit the form. When somebody has filled out the form, as the form author, now there's the question of how the form responses get collected. If I click here on responses, I can look and see information here, a little bit of analytics information, but there's also this link that says create spreadsheet. The spreadsheet is pretty important to have. If I go ahead and choose create here as the form author. Again, this is not what the form sender, the person who filled out the form, will see. Having created the spreadsheet, now, I can then do a couple of interesting things with that. So under the tools list in my spreadsheet, I can choose notification rules and have an email sent to me whenever somebody submits the form, for instance. and I can choose to either get a list, a package, a bundle of messages at the end of the day, or an email right away. If I choose notify me when someone submits the form and do it right away and hit save, then just what it sounds like. The next time somebody fills out that form and hits enter, I'll get a message in my inbox saying, a user submitted the form, transportation form. So that's pretty great. Then the other thing that you can do I skipped over parts. So far I've shown you how to share it with specific individuals. Maybe you need it to be out there generally available to people so they can share it around with each other. If that's the case, then you might go send and then choose link. I can take this link and I can copy it. Okay, and this is about embedding in a web page, so not usually as useful. This is a new feature. They didn't used to have this thing for shorten URL. I like to use a URL shortening website called tinyurl because it lets me specify what the URL should be. But in this case, they give you an option to have Google make this shorter URL. Now I can no more remember this than I could remember the long one. So to me that's not especially useful. But if I do have it by like a link and I copy that, then I can send that out to other people. And so that's another way to do it. And then the people can pass that link around to other people, and then they can go ahead and fill out the form without me knowing to whom it's going before it gets sent out. And URL shortening, the thing I like about the tinyurl option is that I can then remember, I can actually go in. I probably shouldn't be pitching a particular service, but the thing I like about this URL shortener is I could paste in my long link and then put in my custom alias. So if I say tinyurl.com/ SAIT form or something, whatever it is, if it's available and hasn't been used already, then that'll be my URL, and I can actually remember that because it's a word instead of a random string of alphanumeric characters. So I would use URL shortening if I were printing on a flyer and I needed people to be able to look at it and then remember it and go, or easily write it down. But if I were sending it out by email, doing the URL shortening wouldn't be as necessary. Okay, then we talked about getting notified when a response comes in. And then because it's a spreadsheet, you have other options too, like, let me bring up an example. So the example I keep using of my computer class form survey, I can make in my form responses, I can come and say, let's say I want to insert a row up here. I could do account or account A. So if I do account from C3, and I could just keep my count going through, all 300 rows of this spreadsheet as it exists right now. So it's counting 200 responses because I've got 2 rows. I'm on row 202 and I've got 2 rows of header. And then if somebody else comes in and fills out something and puts a class in here, how to sort laundry. as soon as a new submission comes in here, I could get my little counter to tick up and show me that something else has changed. So I like having a little summary like that at the top. That way people can keep adding things. You can also add information off to the right. Like if I've got, earlier when I didn't have my class dates sortable, I had to add my own sortable date. And then maybe you can have additional information to the right of your form fields in your spreadsheet that you can use to mark up information about that row. So maybe, there's a certificate that somebody can get, and I want to keep track of whether I've given them the certificate or not. I can go ahead and just add a column out here and have it be next to this row, or say yes or whatever I want to say to this to keep track of it. And it won't affect the ability of this to continue acting as a form data collector. And then even nicer than that, being a spreadsheet, you can set it up to do a pivot table and see responses and that kind of thing, just the way you would any other spreadsheet. So handy that way. All right, and I guess that covers the subject. So I will go ahead and edit this video and make it available to the rest of the people.